All right, welcome everyone. As part of our commitment to expose the MBA program to the kinds of concepts that we've been talking about in class, including cloud computing, we're fortunate in that we've got one of the major data center vendors right here in Denver. I'm here with this session with Dave Leonard, who is the Chief Data Center Officer here at ViaWest. The intention today is to walk you through a tour of a data center. It's a unique opportunity because it's really difficult to get 400 people to go through a tour like this, so this is the next best thing. The objective today is to walk through the data center and really talk about what it takes to put together a facility like this, what it means to you as potential customers, and what it means in terms of computing in general. Certainly the move these days is toward more cloud-based computing. So that's the objective. We're going to try to, it'll be fairly informal, casual, much like you'd see if we were trying to do this with a tour. Dave is going to walk us through the data center. We'll be asking questions as we go. But before we get in some of the areas it's quite loud and audio may be a problem in there. I'd like to have Dave talk for a minute about the company, your role, ViaWest's presence, both here in Colorado and within the U.S. Talk a little bit about the history, and then we'll go inside and take a look. So Dave, thank you very much for helping us out with this today.
Well, thanks for the opportunity, and welcome to all of you to ViaWest, even if only virtually. Hopefully some of you will see the place in person also. It shows a little bit better in person than it does on video. ViaWest is a data center, co-location, cloud services, and managed services company. We operate in 7 states in the western part of the United States, hence the name ViaWest as opposed to Via something else. We have 27 data centers that we deliver those services out of. This is one of those data centers. The services go anywhere from co-location services, which is basic space and power. Somebody else provides all the services in there. We just provide the cooling and the space and the power, all the way up to a customer that doesn't want to buy their own computers, that wants to rent cloud, compute, storage, backup from a vendor and give that problem completely to us. So we have that spectrum of services across the infrastructure of IT.
So in terms of this particular data center, how would this compare to some of the other major data centers around the country?
This is one of our larger data centers. The building is about 200,000 square feet. The raised floor, or the technical space that we sell as our product, is a little over 100,000 square feet. The total power coming into the building is in the neighborhood of 13 megawatts of power. That puts it into certainly the top 1% of all data centers across the United States. There are bigger ones, notable bigger ones, but it'll be very difficult, for instance, in Colorado, to find one that's bigger than this.
And in terms of, we've taken a quick look around prior to doing this video, but in terms of the investment that ViaWest has made into this, just this one in particular, how does that compare? What kind of investment has the company made?
And I'll answer that by giving you a little bit of why it costs so much, and then I'll tell you why it costs so much, or what it does cost. We're in the business of providing peace of mind to our customers, and if we give them space and power, or we give them services that are people-based, the customers expect that those are going to be first quality. So this data center and most of our data centers are built to be fault tolerant. So anything can fail, and there's another system to pick up the load. So if we lose power from a utility, we have our own generation. We actually have 2 utility services. We have 4 generators. So there's redundancy built upon redundancy to deliver that seamless peace of mind. All of that ends up costing money. If we were to reinvest and rebuild this data center from scratch, the investment would be in the neighborhood of $100 million or more. We're not going to do it because it's a great data center, but we are investing in a data center that's larger than this, just a little bit south of here in the Denver Tech Center, another one that's fairly close to the same size in Minneapolis. And so you can imagine our capital budget is many tens of millions of dollars.
So obviously you're in the business of providing these services, and you mentioned that the customers can contract for a whole range of services. As we get out in the data center and take a look at this, what would you say is sort of your sweet spot in terms of your customer base?
The customer base varies all over the place. We're very happy to have a customer that rents one cabinet from us or just a few virtual machines in our cloud environment. But an average customer for us would be somebody that needs about 8 or 10 cabinets worth of space or 100 VMs in our cloud environment, somebody that takes down maybe 200 square feet of cage space from us. That said, we have customers that take over 20,000 square feet of cage space individually. Mm-hmm. So it's a pretty wide spectrum. Our real focus is on those customers that value a local presence, local touch, a high degree of personalized, not customized, but personalized services, and see a differentiation in the quality of service that we supply. We're not in the business of supplying a commodity service and competing on price.
But, and we talked about this earlier, as we go through the tour, we definitely want you to really show us the cloud. Mm-hmm. So at some point say, okay, here's the cloud. But in terms of that, you said customers like to have a local presence here. I think that we talked earlier, there's a couple hundred customers represented in this facility, but they're not all local. They could be anywhere, correct?
Yes. I don't know the exact numbers, but in this facility, of the 200 or so customers that are here, I would say probably 65% of them are companies that are either headquartered in Colorado or have a major operating presence in Colorado. And there is a high affinity for people to want to be near their servers, either because they supply services to them themselves, they go in and do the work that they don't ask us to do, or just because there's comfort. If anything goes wrong, I can drive there and I can touch it. And it used to be called server hugging, and it's becoming less prevalent, but it's still there. And then the other aspect of that is that the personal relationship that we have in the community, because we're very community oriented, you just end up trusting people in the business community, and we're part of that community, and you're going to do business with people you trust.
I'll get specifications for the data center, and we'll provide those to the students independent of this. But talk about the compute capacity, really, that you have within this particular data center.
We count the things that we deliver. So we count space, and we count power, and we count compute instances in our cloud. And so some of those things are very easy to count. Some of the other things, like how many computers all the customers have in this space, are a lot harder to count. So I'll give you some counts of things that we have. We have cloud environment that's in this data center and in others that has the capacity to eliminate the need for our customers to purchase 60,000 virtual machines. And like I say, we'll show you the cloud out there. It looks like computers, because it is. But that capacity is huge compared to the size of how much we use here, the actual space we use. We have about 14,000 cabinets or racks that we supply to our customers out in all of our data centers. And if you think that there's probably an average of 20 to 30 servers per cabinet, you can do the math and end up with several 100,000 computers that we're running in our data centers.
So this is, we're going to talk in class about the various layers of architecture and infrastructure that it takes to deploy an effective IT system of any sort. What we're going to do now is to take a look at some of those, and with the emphasis being on some of the things that you perhaps don't see and that are very tangible parts of the cloud. It's not vapor at all. It's going to be the things that you see today, including things like physical and virtual security, infrastructure that supports climate control, environmental considerations. Dave will be addressing power, the infrastructure itself, the network, the wiring, the cages, protection, all of those things as we walk through. We're going to see the control room, take a look at the power, the power room, take a look at how the building infrastructure is set up. So I think it's best that we head out and take a look at some of these things we're talking about.
You are in the ViaWest data center now. To get to this point, you had to pass through 2 layers of security already. That was 2 locked doors that you either need to be let in or have credentials, badge, to get in. There is also a security person or receptionist that you've gone by to get to this point. We believe in security in depth, both physical security and logical security. What I'm showing you here is obviously physical security, where there's multiple levels of security, like I said. We're in security zone 3. We're about to go towards the data center floor, so we have to go through another layer of security. As you see ahead of us, doors are impeding your ability to get there. If you look to the right, you'll see a bioscanner that has my fingerprint in it. That's 2-factor authentication, one of the factors being my card, and one of the factors being my finger, which is very difficult for somebody to spoof. That unlocked that door, and now we're getting closer to getting into the data center. So we're now entering the data center. We use tacky mats to pick up all the dust that might be on our feet. We're now in one of several rooms within the data center, and this is our sellable space. We call it white floor or raised floor. Cooling underneath the computers on the raised floor, as you can see inside these cages. This room is about 40,000 square feet of space that you can see here. The total in the data center is about a little over 103,000 square feet. So you can see these are pretty big spaces. I'm going to be talking as we go through the tour in terms of how we distribute electricity to the cabinets and to the computers, from the utility all the way down through conditioning to the computers. And then also be talking about the cooling loop, how we grab the heat that the computers create and drag it through the data center, through the chiller room, and eventually reject it out to the outside atmosphere. So this is the final delivery point of power to cabinets that you can't quite see over there for security reasons. And we send power out of these distribution panels underneath the floor, goes into the cages, into the cabinets to be distributed to the computers. If you notice, we use labeling. There's many different power delivery systems in this data center, and we try to use labeling to make it clear where you are and what system you're operating under. And we'll see that use of color throughout the data center. In our co-location services, we offer granularity of services anywhere from a half a cabinet that you see right here with 2 separate locks on it, to a full cabinet, to cages that might have 5,000 cabinets in an individual cage. In a data center, managing airflow is very, very important. So I'm standing by a cold aisle. There's a whole row of cabinets here, and you can tell it's the cold aisle because there's perforated tiles down here where the cold air underneath the floor is coming up and going through the servers. Keeping that cold aisle separated from the hot aisle, which is right over here, is very important. We want all the air to go through the computers and get warmed up in the hot aisle rather than having the cold air wrap around or the hot air wrap around into the cold aisle. So that's airflow management 101. Up till now, we've seen data center space that's largely full. Here's an example of some of the space that we still have yet to sell. We don't have that much space left to sell here, which is why we're building our new data center down in Centennial. As you can see, it's empty white floor, ready for cages, ready for cabinets, plenty of power distribution that's all ready to go. The cooling's in place. So I guess get it while it's hot. There's a little bit of the space left in the Cornell data center. We've gone through a lot of security to get to this point onto the raised floor, and then individual customers want more security. We've got a cage right here that has no cage top. The floor tiles are not screwed down, so we consider that our normal standard security. There might be a customer that processes credit cards, or that has a HIPAA healthcare compliance requirement, or that has a federal government requirement, and they need a more secure cage. So on my left here, this cage has a top on it, so nobody could get over the top, and all the floor tiles are screwed down, so nobody can get into it from below. So it's a HIPAA compliant or a PCI compliant or a FSMA compliant cage. And then some customers, like this one, choose to do all of that and put up opaque material so nobody can even see what's in their cage. It all comes down to what the customer wants and what meets their needs.
One final aspect about security that I won't tell you which cage here because it's a very highly secure cage is the processes and procedures that we have to follow. So there are some cages in this room that I'm in that everybody that's going to get access to that cage has to go through a federal government security check, including a background check, including fingerprinting, identification of who you are, and you have to be a U.S. citizen to enter some of these cages, which means that my boss, the CEO, because she's Canadian, can't get into some of those cages, which I routinely rub in her face. So welcome to ViaWest Cloud. A lot of people wonder what a cloud is, what it looks like. Well, it looks like computers, because that's what a cloud is. There's compute, there's storage, there's backup in these cages that we serve to our customers by the drink. There's enough computing power in these cages in our cloud to offset what would traditionally have been the purchase of 60 to 70,000 physical servers. Way more energy efficient, way more cost effective, and customers don't have to manage this hardware. That's one of the benefits of going to a cloud environment. Our major vendors in this space, our current platform is a Cisco UCS platform backed by NetApp and EMC storage. You'll also see a lot of HP compute and a lot of Dell compute in these cages, and that's what we build our cloud with. Does it feel rainy in here? You're actually inside a cloud. This is some of the storage that backs up our cloud. There's compute all around you, there's backup all around you. So this is what it feels like to be inside a cloud. In addition to reliable power and cooling, we need to have very reliable and easy to use networking. So I'm standing in front of a network rack here. The network starts out in the street where the telecom providers are. We have 4 separate physical entrances or vaults that service this building. So even if we have a person trenched down the street, it's not going to interrupt our service here. That comes into our meet me rooms where we allow cross connects between customer cages and our cloud managed services environment that we have here. So you can very easily connect up your cables to whatever telecommunications provider that you want. You can see the ladder racking above us. The management of all the cables is very important. The labeling of all the cables is very important. And all of that makes it easy to operate, easy to do business within the data center. Where we're going to next is the nerve center, the control center of the data center. It's one of 18 virtual technology assistance centers, or VTACs, that exist throughout our 27 data centers, and we can control all of the data centers from each one of these. This is where our personnel sit, they watch the systems, they get dispatched from here, and they answer phone calls from here. So we're going to head on in and see what it looks like.
The cloud control, the managed services control, all of that happens in this room. When a customer calls in, the calls come into this room and they're handled by an engineer. Customer service is a very, very important differentiator for ViaWest, and our call rate, our successful call rate, and our call pickups times are among the best in the industry. So this is the brains of the data center right here.
We mentioned on the data center floor the final delivery of power from those gray panels that we saw into the cabinets. Well, now we're going to start where power gets created and take that power flow all the way back to where we connect up to those panels. Power starts in a data center in one of 2 ways. The way that we really care about is through our generation. This is a generator, an MTU generator. It's a diesel generator. It is able to start and take load in 10 seconds, and it's 5,000 horsepower, to give you an idea of its size. It's one of 4 data centers, or one of 4 generators that we have in this data center. That power gets created in the generation. It goes through an aggregation point where all of that power from those 4 generators are gained together for delivery downstream. This is the fuel system that feeds the generators that we just saw. We have 2 20,000-gallon diesel fuel tanks that are underground here. Those are served to the generators by 2 independent pumping stations. This is one of the 2 pumping stations that feeds the generators. You see multiple sets of pipe, multiple sets of pumps a spare pump over here, and if you look way in the back, there's a manual lever that you can pump the fuel manually if you're strong enough. That shows you the level of redundancy that we have to supply energy into the data center. It's redundancy upon redundancy upon redundancy. So we use it in test mode every month. That's part of our testing. In the life of this data center, knock on wood, I wish there was some wood around here right now, we've never had to use it because we've never lost both of our utility feeds at the same time. So you're standing in this room surrounded by millions of dollars of generator and generator control gear and switching gear that, as I mentioned, has never ever been used in real life. That's an insurance policy. This board in front of me is the major brains that control the power distribution in this data center. On this side, we've got two substation feeds. Don't know if you can read that. It says Meadow Hills. It says Sullivan, two separate substations that come from two separate directions. Both of them are active. The breaker is closed, which means we're getting power fed from both of those substations at the same time. If we lose one substation because Xcel Energy has a problem with it, we can power the whole place off the other one and vice versa. If we lose both, which I just mentioned has never happened here, we'd go over to our generator control, which is on the far side, and we'd fire up those 4 generators, and in just a few seconds, we'd be able to take the load of the data center. We have uninterruptible power supply systems that bridge that few seconds so that the power to the computers and the storage out there on the raised floor is never interrupted, never at danger.
So Dave, do you care if I just turn one of these breakers?
I wouldn't recommend that you touch anything
just
here.
To test it?
Yeah, that would not be a good idea. Now we're continuing the flow of power through the data center. This board is where all that generation lands and all of the utility lands. So on either side of this 22 cubicle medium voltage switchgear lineup is one utility, another utility on the other side, and then generation lands on one side and the other side. Give you an idea of investment. If we had to replace this 22 cubicle medium voltage switchgear lineup, it would be about $10 million of just equipment cost, never mind install cost. We take that power, we run it through transformers, which you can see here on the right. So now we're moving from medium voltage, 12,470 volt, down to lower voltage, 480 volt, that we run through the UPS systems and through future transformation down to the computers. We're going to go in through 2 rooms that one of them is pretty noisy that I'll introduce as we get there. The first room is not too noisy. We're now in the battery room, one of the battery rooms of the data center. I mentioned uninterruptible power supplies. The way they work is when utility power is lost, it relies on the batteries that are in these cabinets to provide power until we get our generation going. Our generation starts up in maybe 10 to 15 seconds before it can take load. These batteries are sized to be able to run for 10 minutes. So we have plenty of time to supply power out to the computers, never losing power to the computers as we get our generation switched on. You notice the blinking lights here? Fortunately, they're green. I don't see any of them being yellow and none of them red. These are battery monitoring. Throughout our environment, we try to monitor everything, and we monitor the condition of all the pieces of equipment, in this case batteries, and we want to see them going bad. We don't want to replace them in advance of them going bad or when they start to go bad, because that would be wasteful and bad for the environment. We definitely don't want to replace them too late. So monitoring across all the pieces of equipment, including each individual battery being monitored, is very important to our operating philosophy. Enter a really noisy room right now. It's where the actual uninterruptible power supplies, UPSs, are that are at the heart of a data center. They're pretty noisy. What they're doing is they're deconstructing the electric sine wave coming from the utility and then reconstructing it back to make sure it's perfectly smooth, perfectly in sync. So we're cleaning the power in real time as we go through this room. Then we're transforming it down to voltages that a computer can use, which would be 120 volts or 208 volts, and sending it out to the floor. We're gonna pan down each of the rows to show you it. You're first gonna see UPSs, then you're gonna see distribution. So to recap, we saw the entire power flow. First, we saw the cabinets being fed by the panels out on the raised floor. Then we went over to the generators, saw power being generated, how it's managed through the control system, how it's distributed through the medium voltage switchgear, how it comes through transformers into the UPS. That final shot we saw was the distribution that then feeds those panels out on the raised floor. So that's the entire flow of power being delivered from the utility or from generation out to a computer. Now let's talk about cooling in the data center. Getting heat into or electricity into the data center is very easy compared to getting the heat out of the data center or the cool into the data center. There's 3 cooling loops that I'll talk about. The first one I'll talk about right here, and that's the air loop. What we're standing in front of is a row of computer room air handlers, or CRAs. What their job is to do is to collect hot air that we collect out of the ceiling where the computers exhaust their hot air, and we bring it through this CRA and we exchange that hot air into basically a radiator or a chilled water coil and produce cold air that goes underneath the raised floor back into the computers. So that's an air loop, cold air going up, becoming warm, and coming back down. We're going to go into the chiller room and talk about where does that now hot water that used to be chilled water go to. So come with me to the chiller room. We're now in the chiller room, and as you can hear, it's noisy in here. We have chillers running, which are cooling devices. The cold water that got supplied to the CRAs that we just saw out on the raised floor gets generated in this room or created in this room. And if you look behind me, you can see dark blue pipes. Those are the chilled water pipes. The hotter water that's coming back from those CRAs is coming through the lighter blue pipes. We use color throughout the environment, as I mentioned once before, because it's very easy to identify where is the chilled water, where is the less chilled water returned. The green is the third loop, which is condenser water or tower water, and that goes from the chillers or from the flat plate heat exchanger that I'll come back to out to cooling towers where evaporation rejects that heat out to the atmosphere. So there's 3 loops. The air loop, where we collect hot air and turn it into hot water. The chilled water loop, where we collect that heat and return it to the chillers. And the condenser or tower water loop, where we take that heat and transport it out to the tower. If you look to the right, you'll see 2 centrifugal chillers. Very highly efficient chilling devices, each of them 900 tons of cooling capacity. There's room for a third one down there. All of that cooling capacity, if the day is cold enough, which it's not today because you hear them running, if it was cold enough, this device behind me, the flat plate heat exchanger, can do all of that cooling without requiring all these motors, and it'd be a much quieter day in here. So once again, energy efficiency, very, very important in running a data center. So all of the infrastructure in a data center has to be very well thought out from the beginning. You see the complexity that we've got in this room. This is one of 2 chiller rooms that power this data center. So there's another 2 chillers in another room that look identical to this. You notice there's a big empty space here. That's where the 3rd chiller in this room is going to go. There's a 3rd chiller that's currently going into the other room. Think of taking a massive chiller like what we see here, moving it into this room and getting it positioned correctly. It doesn't even look like there's room to get it in, but we've modeled everything, 3D modeled everything to know exactly how it's going to fit in here, exactly what pipe it's going to connect into. We know the water flow, we know the horsepower that's required. Everything's pre-engineered for the life of the data center before the data center even starts getting built. Tremendous amount of design engineering up front in a data center before we ever get to operate it.
All right, well, we're going to wrap up the tour. We have tried to condense in really just a few minutes what's a very sophisticated, elaborate operation. As you can see, I'll have Dave wrap up in a center, but you can see the implications of all the subsystems that have to go together, that have to work together for a highly sophisticated, complex data center like this. Dave, you might comment about the role of many of your vendor partners, the partnerships that you have established here. Clearly, it's more than just ViaWest that makes a system like this run.
Yeah, as you mentioned before, it takes a village. It takes a village to build a data center. It takes a village to operate a data center. So we have partners, and we use partners wherever they can do a better job than our people. You see a lot of our people in the data center and in the VTAC, and that's because our people can do a better job than the vendor can. We can control it better. We can have a better result. There's some activities like maintaining a UPS, for instance, that we don't do often enough. We would never do often enough to be the foremost experts on it, and so we rely on our vendors to do it. They do it to our specification and to our standards and to our procedures, so under our intellectual property and under our control, but they're far better at doing that. And that's the same case in the cloud, where Dell is better at maintaining Dell servers than ViaWest will ever be, so we allow them to do hardware maintenance, for instance. So picking your vendors, developing deep and very strong relationship with your vendors, and then trusting them to do their job is a very important part of what we do.
So you also mentioned the value of those partnerships. I mean, it's also important for those vendors to know the ViaWest culture, to appreciate the values, the standards that you're trying to bring to your customer base. So is there a way that you acclimate them to the ViaWest culture?
Yeah, and the cultural thing is often overlooked because a lot of people focus on technical skills and they don't think about, does this organization and do these people really value doing what's right and value doing what's good for the customer and doing it in a way that's really good for the customer. And when I say customer, I mean both us as a customer and our customers as a customer, because at the end of the day, it's really about serving our customers. And so that cultural evaluation is one of the evaluations way up front in the selection of a vendor. For example, I have been, in the last couple of years, I've gone through 12 evaluations of construction companies that I want to do business with. 2 of those have come out of that evaluation as being companies that I want to try to do some work with. And a lot of that screening out is based on cultural values, how transparent they're going to be, how much they're willing to adopt our way of doing business, how much they're willing to challenge us when we're wrong, which, believe it or not, actually does happen occasionally. I forgot we're on film. That's a bad thing to admit. But that relationship between the vendors and us to supply a seamless service to the customer is a hugely important thing.
And you noticed as we were walking through this facility, what's 200,000 square feet?
Roughly 200,000 square feet.
Approximately how many people do you have here at a time, ViaWest employees, who are maintaining the facility?
We have different functions here. So the people that are actually maintaining the facility, the electrical system and the cooling system and the core infrastructure of the building, there's a handful of those people. They're here 24/7, so they add up, but at any given time there might be only 3 or 4 of them here, and maybe only a couple of them here at nights and on weekends. So there's maybe 8 to 10 facility engineer type people here. Then you have the people in the virtual technical assistance center, the VTAC that we looked at, the control center. They're also here 24/7. There are also a few of them staffed in the day and a few less at night. So there's probably another 6 to 8 to 10 of those folks. And then there's some support staff, the security people, the receptionist at the front desk. A total of maybe 20 employees in this facility.
So it's lean, and that's part of the model as well, right? That the infrastructure itself, the systems that are involved in managing the infrastructure help reduce the number of people that it takes to physically manage the facility.
Yes, everything that we can automate is automated, because when you get automation right, process control right, it's going to operate far faster and far more uniformly than a person could ever operate. Always under our control at the end of the day, so manual overrides on everything. The automation allows us to reduce the people. The other side of that coin is that in a data center, there's a whole ecosystem. It takes a village, I said. We've got vendors in here, we've got customers in here, we've got construction people in here, we've got fire inspectors, we've got a whole variety of people. At any given time in the day in this data center, there might be 100 people. Very few of those are our employees, but the economic engine that a data center generates is far greater than its employee impact.
You might comment too, we didn't have a chance really during the tour to talk about ViaWest's commitment towards sustainability, but if you could maybe make an overall comment about that and how that fits in with the mission and vision that Nancy and the rest of the management team inspires.
ViaWest, one of our core tenets is community, and we want to be good to the community, and that includes being environmentally sound to the community. Data centers use a lot of energy. There's no getting around it. They use far less energy than if those same computers were not in a data center, because we're more efficient. Efficiency in a data center is measured using power usage effectiveness. It's an equation that measures how effective you are at using the energy for useful work, for computers, as opposed to for cooling or for security system or for lighting or whatever else. Our data centers are built on the tenet that power usage effectiveness has to be designed in from the very beginning. We have to use free cooling wherever possible. We saw the flat plate heat exchanger, which does that in the chiller room. Further to that, we try to build using locally available materials and be sustainable in everything we do. That goes down to hiring people locally, sourcing materials locally, sourcing equipment locally, and that community relationship is a very, very important tenet of how ViaWest operates.
And certainly a large user of power and water, and that of course is important here in Colorado in particular. Probably up until this last couple of years, Colorado has had an extraordinary reputation for not having a lot of physical hazards that companies would have to worry about. And the last couple of years we have seen fires, floods, and other things, but what are some of the advantages of being located here in Colorado for a data center like this?
For a data center operator, Colorado is an awesome place to be. It starts with our customers. We've got a huge customer base here. This is our largest customer base of the seven states that we operate in. And so it starts with proximity to the customers. We build that in other locations. What you can't build in other locations is the excellent climatic conditions to operate a data center in. You mentioned hazards. There's very few physical hazards here. We don't have earthquakes. Prior to last summer in Boulder, we used to say we don't have floods, but none of our data centers are anywhere near a flood zone. We don't have tornadoes. We have heavy snow, but that doesn't impact buildings that are built like this building. We also have very dry air, which if you're going to use evaporation as a way, like we do at this data center, to reject heat to the atmosphere, evaporation is a great way to do it. People worry about water usage. The amount of water we evaporate pales in comparison to the amount of water used in utility energy generation, to where if we can reduce our PUE, power usage effectiveness, to reduce our energy consumption, that's the best way for us to save water. A little counterintuitive to most people. But thinking about all aspects of a data center in Colorado, there aren't any negatives to it. Forest fires, if we have a forest fire here, which is a hazard we've seen recently, we just close out our use of any outside air. So it's not a problem. We'll detect it, but it's not a problem on operations. So of all the states that we operate in, I would say environmentally, Colorado is probably the best.
And I'll put this on you, even though you're the Chief Data Center Officer, but for many of our students represent companies that are potential customers. What do you, within the company standpoint, what are some of the primary advantages these days of companies, particularly SMEs, in looking at using cloud-based services or co-location services from ViaWest as opposed to doing this on their own?
It all gets back to what do you as a business want to do, and what do you as a business want to focus your resources on, whether that's your skill resources or your economic resources, your capital, your operating rigor. You can only do so much. And if you're a grocery store, your core delivery of service is not computing. It's delivering really fresh, great groceries. And so what I always say is take the things that you don't want to do and that you don't want to be expert in and that you don't want to spend your capital in. If you don't want to spend millions of dollars building a data center, then rent one from somebody who does. If you don't want to invest in computers and invest in database administrators and virtual machine VMware experts and Linux experts and Windows experts, then don't invest in those. Invest in your own business and give those kind of context functions off to somebody who does them for a living. So it gets down to that. Focus on what's really important to you. And then economically, we do all of those things at scale, and at a scale that a small to medium-sized enterprise, all but the very largest enterprise, can't do. And so we have an unfair advantage from a cost perspective compared to our customers. For a customer to replicate having the database depth of experience that we have in their own company, they'd have to have 20 database experts. Well, not a lot of companies want to afford to have 20 database experts. So focus on what's core to your business, and then look at the economics of how we can do it not only better but cheaper than most organizations.
It is interesting, isn't it, that the industry has really come full circle, because this was the phenomena that we looked at 25, 30 years ago, was the whole concept of a service bureau.
Mm-hmm.
And then everything migrated towards a desktop on every desk. And now with mobility, the amount of data that's being generated every day, the whole concept of big data, it's interesting how we've come back full circle to now relying upon companies like yours to do much of that work for organizations.
Yeah, I always think it's funny. People talk about cloud like it's a new concept. Mainframe time sharing of 30, 40 years ago was a cloud.
Was exactly that.
It was virtual, it was compute, it was storage. You didn't have to manage it, you consumed it on demand. It had all the characteristics of cloud today. It just didn't have as good marketing.
Yeah, didn't have the name. Hey, thank you very much for your time today, the tour. We appreciate the partnership with ViaWest, and thank you very much.
Yeah, appreciate you guys coming out.
Yeah.
Thanks.